and also the coordinator of the Education Committee. And we plan this year to have 4 invitational workshops based on the success that we had in 2021. And our committee purpose is really to advance transactional analysis by informing people about our training opportunities, workshops, and other events. And I invite you to visit our website, USATAA.org, where you can become more familiar with our organization, our membership, and our events. We're delighted to start off the season, the year 2022, with John McNeel's Getting to Redecision workshop. This is a 2-hour event, and that will include a 10-minute break and a question and answer period. Now, attendees can request a certificate of attendance by going to coordinator@usataa.org. And you can also apply for continuing ed credits by emailing adam@seinstitute.org. There will be a $10 administration fee and a form, an evaluation form for you to fill out if you want the continuing ed credits. Wayne Hart, a member of our council and also a member of the Education Committee, is going to give you some of the highlights of our speaker, John McNeel, today, so you'll understand why we are so excited to have him present Getting to Redecision. Wayne?
Thanks, Brenda, and hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. John McNeel. He's a licensed psychologist who writes and practices in San Jose, California, and he's a past member of the Board of Trustees of ITAA and a past editor of the TA Journal. Dr. McNeel has been a student of redecision therapy for over 50 years. His teachers were Bob and Mary Goulding of the Western Institute for Group and Family Therapy. With Bob's encouragement, John returned to graduate school to obtain his PhD in psychology, where he completed the first systematic research on the efficacy of redecision therapy with his dissertation, Redecisions in Psychotherapy, a study of the effects of an intensive weekend workshop. Dr. McNeel has altered the language taught by his teachers, and he now uses the phrase injunctive messages in place of the word injunctions. Resolving injunctive messages is the focus of this workshop. And we ask that for the remainder of our program today, please use Zoom chat function only to post questions intended for John. Now, on behalf of all the members of USATAA and our guests here today, welcome, John.
We can't hear you yet.
Oh, there you go. How about
Yep, there it goes. Yep.
that? Good. I do better unmuted. So I'm delighted to be here today, and certainly I hope that you find what I have to teach will be helpful, both in your own personal understanding of yourself and as your work and psychotherapy, or whichever one of the mental health pursuits you perform. Let me just start off with the initial slide here, and it's just the title of the workshop. And so I want to begin by showing you my favorite picture of my teachers, Bob and Mary Goulding. This is my favorite picture of the two of them because they are actually, this is June 29th, 1974. And if you can see the tears in Bob's eyes, that's exactly right. And Mary's wonderful smile. And they are watching me get married. on the front lawn of the Western Institute for Group and Family Therapy. And before I move on into the body of the work, I want to say something, because we're meeting right now at a time when we're facing once again the atrocity of needless war. And I want to tell you that I met Bob Gouldy when I was a senior in seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. And that's a long story, but we had an interview. And in that interview, I asked him, because I was on my way to becoming a minister and I was interested in why people did what they did. And I asked Bob, I said, why do you do psychotherapy? And he said, that's a very good question. He said, this is going to sound a little grandiose. He said, and I don't expect this to happen in my lifetime. But he said, I truly believe that performing psychotherapy, teaching psychotherapy, is the most effective way to someday end war in the world. He said, I truly believe that if people feel okay about themselves and they feel okay about other people, they would no longer kill them. So I would just like to remember those words. And by the way, when I met Bob Gouldy, the Vietnam War was raging. I was in an institution that was extremely active in opposing that war. And it was an endless war, and 300 to 400 American kids were being killed a week. So I just wanted to take that moment to share with you as we get into the body of this material. Okay. Okay. So Bob and Mary Gouldy, and they were the creators of the concept of redecision. That word, actually, it's not a word in the English language, which I always find to be kind of interesting, since I've been using it for 50 years. And the theory of injunctions, both of them were their creations. And this is a picture of Bob and Mary, here again, my teachers, and they are receiving the Eric Byrne Memorial Scientific Award, and which was a huge honor. And they're receiving it for, I believe the title was 12 Injunctions and the theory and redecisions. It may have been 15, but at that point, there was basically for a long time the canon of 12 injunctions. And then a few years later, they added a few more and the canon became 15. So now we went from those 15 to, in the blink of an eye right there, we just went from 15 injunctions to the concept of injunctive messages and 25 injunctive messages, and I'm going to be talking about this. So another way to think about the leap is, that's me. At either my first or second ITAA conference, they're giving me an applause because I put on a little play that day. For anybody who's an old timer, right behind me, barely peeking out with a cup of coffee is my beloved friend, Jim Heenan. The guy smiling at me is named Charlie Tuggle. This is a long time ago. So that in the same way we've jumped from 12 injunctive messages to these rather complicated charts that I've created. Another way to put it is we've gone from this to this. But fortunately, I think the smile was fairly consistent. So I want to give you just a little bit of background about Bob and Mary and their mission in life. They were people with a purpose, and at the time that they came on the scene, they were disgusted, frankly, with analytic therapy that saw people 4 or 5 times a week, and after years and years and years, the therapist would announce to the patient, "You've made a little progress." And they were in total opposition of that. And their goal was to create a more powerful psychotherapy that put the power in the hands of the patient and where you could get in and get out. And then they developed their whole system of injunctions and redecisions around that concept. And they also believed, and I'll say more obviously about injunctions, but they believed that someone could finish with an injunction. That is, they could rid it from their lives through the power of a redecision, which for them was a dramatic action taken in a regressive scene where you were reliving the original scene where you got the injunction, and then from a newly empowered place, helped by the therapist, you made a new decision, and they felt that you could then end the power of the injunction in your life, and it would no longer have power. I will say this, that I wish all of you could have been there. It's hard to imagine the excitement that these two individuals created with their work. They were charismatic, they were caring, they were smart. People came from all over the world to train with them, and the atmosphere that was created at their institute on the side of Mount Madonna was nothing less than magic. And I really got my initial training about how to be a psychotherapist from them. I'd gone to seminary. My master's degree was in theology, not in psychology. And I went out and, along with a number of colleagues, Carol Solomon, if you're in the crowd today, you and I were on a paper one time, and we gave a talk called Sins We Have Committed while doing redecision therapy, because we were all shocked to find out we were seeing people more than a year. And Bob and Mary were very clear, you should be able to see people for a short period of time and be done. As we sought to implement their model, we found that it didn't work. I mean, it worked in the sense of it created great moments, but it didn't lead to the sort of lasting changes. And I had two training groups over time, one in Los Angeles for 11 years. And we decided to really take a look at the theory of injunctions, because Bob and Mary believed there was an injunction, there was an early decision that led to that decision got made into a lifetime decision, which created an impasse later in life. And it was helping people get through that impasse and make a new decision, and then their lives would be changed. And it was interesting because Bob and Mary would have said their most important discovery was the concept of redecision. And I always felt that their most important contribution was the categorization and identification of injunctions, okay? And when their book came out, Changing Lives with Redecision Therapy, I was so excited. And then there were 3 pages on injunctions, one little tiny paragraph, each one. And so we said, there's more there. So we began to really take a look at injunctions. Well, we made a lot of discoveries, and that's what's in the sheets. I mean, this was a journey of discovery. And you also saw the reference to the Roma group. I've had a training group in Rome, actually, well, part of a training thing there for 50 years. And they helped a great deal in this process. So the fundamental proposition we operated with, if injunctions, later the injunctive messages, are real, they leave a footprint that is identifiable and unique to each injunctive message, okay? And so now I'm really jumping, because now we came up with 25 injunctive messages instead of 15. But what we found was really fascinating. Well, Bob and Mary just said there's an injunction and there's a decision. Okay. And they only tried to define the decisions for one of those injunctive messages, and that was the don't exist. They had 3 or 4 suggestions of what decisions could be, but what they were. And we were like, no, if these are real, they're individual entities that each have their own nomenclature. And so what we found out is that, or at least what we believe we found out, is that there wasn't one decision to each injunctive message. There was two. There was a despairing decision because the child was like, and these things are delivered early in life. And you don't really have any choice. Look, I always use the example of the house I grew up in, a small apartment. My father smoked. It was a little tiny apartment, very nice apartment. It was a very tiny place. When he smoked, we all breathed smoke. We didn't have the choice of, I don't like that smoke, I'm not going to breathe it. We had to find a way to respond to it. I say that because Bob and Mary thought young children were autonomous and they could decide or decide not to accept or to respond to an injunction. I disagree with my beloved teachers. So that there was a despairing decision, because if that thing is surrounding you, I mean, it's kind of like me saying as a little kid, the world is full of smoke. That would be an example of the despairing decision. So, and then someplace in there is a defiant decision where the person grabs onto their greatest sense of how they find empowerment. They find something that relieves the despair. And then they begin to do that. And then that leads, you do that thousands of times. Now here again, I agree with Bob and Mary. People didn't make these decisions when they're little to make lifetime decisions. But you do it thousands and thousands of times, it becomes a habit. And that habit is identifiable as what I call the coping behavior. That is the behavior that is created to cope with the injunctive message, okay? That's very important. We're gonna come back to that. So we did come up with 25 injunctive messages. You've got your sheets, 10 pages of sheets from, and there are the 5 categories, and we'll talk about each of these. Is survival, those injunctive messages that affect our ability to survive, and create coping behaviors that are very, very dangerous to us over time. They don't necessarily lead to suicidal behavior immediately, but they create coping behaviors that are very, very exhausting over time. Attachment, our ability to be attached to other people, our identity, feeling okay about ourselves and knowing who we are, our sense of competence in the world, and our sense of security. And we'll say lots more. There they are. So the injunctive message, what makes an injunctive message powerful is that it is a believable falsehood. In the interview that was done for this workshop, and the interviewer asked me, sorry, I'm blocking your name. I know you're there. And she asked me, are there any good injunctions? Well, of course there are. My mother said the only time she ever spanked me was when I ran into the street as a little boy. And she said, stay out of the street. That was a pretty good injunction. But any injunctive messages that have to do with it's not okay for me to be here, to be attached to other people, to be myself, to feel successful or to feel secure, those are destructive. And those are the ones we're interested in. So, and the reason why it has power, it is a believable falsehood. The important word being, it's a falsehood. There is no truth to any of the 25 injunctive messages. There is no truth to the message, you shouldn't be who you are. There's no truth to that, but it's believable if that's what you grow up in. The despairing decision, which comes rather naturally, it's like, responding to that. And remember, small children, they don't have a differentiation. They think the world is them, when I'm making decisions. And if the world is very loving around me, I say, well, I'm a pretty lovable person. And if the world is very angry and hateful and fearful toward me, I'll probably come up with some version of there's something wrong with me. So the despairing decision is what I most fear to be true of me or about life in general. The defiant decision, that's my best attempt to be healthy and resilient. The defiant decision gives me a sense of empowerment where I had none before. This is very important. The defiant decisions they're ingenious. They're ingenious. And they give relief to the despair. Now, they don't resolve the injunctive message, but they give me a much better way to cope with it. And I keep doing that, And that becomes what we call the coping behavior. That is my habit pattern stemming from repeating the defiant decision thousands of times. And this becomes the key to diagnosis, and I'll say more as we go on. Because, and the reason why I emphasize the key to diagnosis, again, if you could have been there, I mean, and I really wish you could have. Wayne, I think you were. And, you know, and maybe a couple others who had the blessing of being up at their institute on 262 Gaffey Road. Well, Bob and Mary were charismatic. And they were brilliant. And they could talk to somebody for a few minutes, and then they would tell them, they would identify their injunction. And they had this intuitive ability. Well, that was their gift. You can't teach that kind of intuitive ability. I tried for years and years and years to be Bob and Mary, kind of a combination of the two of them. That actually wasn't possible, you know. And so there has to be another way to diagnose the injunctions, injunctive messages. Because here again, if they're real, then they will have a footprint, okay? And the footprint becomes the diagnosis. Now, Bob and Mary were very big about, well, they wanted the patient to have power. So he said, okay, you determine what it is you want to change. You know, and they like to do work in 20-minute pieces, so there was no waste of time. Well, the problem with that is that somebody might say the equivalent of I want to work on my shingles when I have cancer. It's like, no, that's I'll say more, but that it's up to us to help people know what their injunctive messages are, and to help in the process of creating that contract. And then we come to the impasse. If you look on your sheets, it's like there's this gap between the left-hand side and the right-hand side. Yeah, and that's the impasse. And the part of the genius of Bob and Mary's work, and watching them do this Gestalt work with someone in a past scene, I mean, it was really amazing because they could help people break through their impasse. Now, the problem is that they thought if the person really broke through it, then they would just go live, if you will, on the right-hand side of the charts. Except that's not actually how change takes place. So think of a wide and deep canyon. You can see the other side. You want to go there. It seems impossible to get across. You know? When people ask me, say, can you help me? I go, yeah. As a matter of fact, I can. Because I'm on the other side. Yeah, I can say, you know, I'm not saying there's a theoretical place over there to go. It's like, no, I'm over there most of the time. And I can help you get there. I also have people who say, after a few sessions, say, doctor, when are you going to start helping me? You just sit there. And I say, I am helping you. And they go, well, it doesn't look like it. And I say, well, if you could see the chipmunk in my brain, you would see that he's exhausted running on the wheel. I said, I'm thinking really hard. I'm really thinking and concentrating really hard. He says, you have an idea what change looks like, but change actually looks a little bit different way. But don't worry, stick around, I'll help you get there. So now the redecision. So for Bob and Mary, the redecision was an action. It was going back in time, recreating this original scene. Again, it was magic to watch. I don't know how many tears I shed watching people doing such moving and inspirational work. I don't know how many times I left the Institute feeling on top of the world because I just watched unbelievable work. But it's more than just a one-time action or a 10-time action. It's a process. And it's the process of integrating a new belief. And this is just recent. By the way, these charts are dynamic. They're always being added to, taken away from, revised. This is not dogma that I'm presenting to you today. Like, there's the charts and that's it. No, these are living documents. And so recently it came to me that it is the integration of a new belief. I mean, you have a false belief created by the original injunctive message. It's a believable falsehood. Okay, so you got some false belief, like I shouldn't be. I fight against it, but still it's got that belief in there. So it's the process of integrating a new belief. And the new belief, and this is really fascinating, it's based on an unsuspected truth. It's that first column you've got on the right-hand side of the impasse. It's a new decision based on an unsuspected truth. Okay. I mean, it's if you really have the don't exist injunctive message, all right? It's an unexpected truth to find out that unconditional love actually exists. So if you don't have it, that there's unconditional love, unconditional affection, unconditional affirmation, that's like mother's milk to you. But if you have that injunctive message, you've spent all of your time making sure that you got enough recognition and respect and conditional affirmation that you don't realize there are people around who have an abundance of unconditional affection inside of them, and they can share it. Okay. The resolving activity. This is too long a story, but this comes out of my years and years and years of helping people resolve type A behavior, because one of the ways that people do that is by doing drills, doing things very intentionally. The way you change type A behavior is you learn how to behave like a type B. Okay. And there are lots and lots of drills that you do. And long story, good story, but too long for here. But the resolving activities, these are directives, these are things, and they're on that sheet. They're directives to create and strengthen new habits. The coping behavior is an old habit. You know, when the despairing decision gets touched by modern day life, and that despair is felt, then the reaction to that is to go straight to the defiant decision, which has been formalized in the coping behavior. And here we're starting to integrate a new belief, like, oh, maybe love really does exist. Maybe I can go look for that rather than all this recognition I've sought. And then we do things that start reinforcing, creating a new habit. And we have to do these thousands of times to create a new habit path. Again, I want to emphasize my beloved teachers. They wanted to create a therapy so powerful. And then they never said this, but they wanted to create a therapy so powerful that it could rewire the brain in a very short period of time. Our brains don't rewire in a short period of time. They can rewire, but they don't do it in a short period of time. And then you need a new parental voice. Look, whatever parental voice you have inside of you, whether or not that parental voice was the cause of your injunctive message, it was either in cahoots with that injunctive message, or it just wasn't powerful enough to stand up to it. I remember first time Bob came to me and put his arm around me and said, "It's actually that dude something Mary said to me," and he said, "Oh no, don't listen to her." She said, "Mary gets off on a tear sometimes, you know, so don't pay any attention to that." And I went, I've never had a parent say that to me before. That I, you know, just don't pay attention to that. And he was a powerful enough parental voice, and he was right. I mean, Bob and Mary, like us, they had their quirks. And so we need a new parental voice that's its main character. It's loving and protective, and it's based in common sense. I mean, if I'm working 80 hours a week and I'm not, you know, working for $1 an hour just in order to survive, but I'm working 80 hours a week, and my survival is not in doubt. Well, someplace in me is a parental voice that's not strong enough that says, you can't do that. That's not good for your health. So it has to be loving and protective and based in common sense. It's like, well, common sense is if you want to have a happy marriage or a happy relationship or a happy family, I mean, you can't work 80 hours a week. That's common sense. Everybody in your emotional life will be starved. And the voice must be equal and more powerful than the injunctive message. Kind of like Bob putting his arm around me, and Mary was kind of giving me an injunction. And he said, don't listen to her. She's kind of nuts about that stuff. It was over, just like that. So the goal, and here it is. It's like, oh, wait a minute, we can stop the workshop. Here's the goal. Just all you need to do is help people move from the left-hand side of the charts to the right-hand side of the chart. That's it. And when injunctive messages are powerful, we tend to live on the left-hand side of the chart. It's kind of what's the word I want? It's like a repeated pattern. And, you know, if there's just the despairing decision, the defiant decision, well, the better place to live from is the defiant decision. I mean, come on. The problem is that you fall back in. So the goal is to get from the left-hand side of the charts through the impasse, which is, by the way, where we come in. If you could just hand this to somebody and they come back and next week and say, thanks, I decided to switch over to the right-hand side, so I'll see you later. It's to switch to the right-hand side and to be able to love, well, yes, be able to love, be able to live there for the majority of the time, okay? So for Bob and Mary, resolving the impasse, active redecision, shatters the impasse, allows new and lasting behaviors. And I did a dissertation, by the way, that sort of proved their theory. Yeah. Binet, the French researcher named Binet, said, you tell me what someone is looking for and I'll tell you what they'll find. Okay, well, I found what I was looking for. But it allows new and lasting behaviors. The injunction is possibly resolved and finished. And if you're here again, if you were around the institute, you would hear Bob and Mary say things, well, they finished with their don't exist today, or I'm going to help them finish with their don't be close this afternoon. This idea of finishing. And here's our hypothesis. And I say, this is the LA group and the Rome group. This is those groups don't exist. This chart doesn't exist. Okay. I had the pleasure of being the synthesizer of all this. But if those people aren't working with me for years and years and years, this stuff does not exist. So our hypothesis, the injunctive messages never go away or are conquered. They are resolved over time by the integration of new beliefs and by practicing new habits. I mean, if we're sleepy enough, hungry enough, and tired enough, and stressed enough, and life dings us, boy, where will we go? To the right-hand side or the left-hand side? The issue then becomes, how long do I live on the left-hand side before I remember that there's a different place I can go, which is the right-hand side, okay? So, again, my teachers were so charismatic, and they were so intuitive. They talked to you for, Mary, and this is the truth, Mary would say things to you like, when you were 5 years old, did you once get a blue pair of pants and it broke your heart because you really wanted a white pair of pants? And people would look at her like, well, that's exactly what happened to me. I mean, I'm sorry. You can't have that kind of preternatural skill. You know? So the diagnosis is an observation and recognition of the coping behavior specific to each injunctive message. Right? And I like to use the example of actually a terrible disease, Marfan syndrome. So I'm doing it with my hand, but if you're a physician and you saw someone whose big toe was tucked underneath their foot and the rest of their toes were curled over that, you would know that that person has a terrible syndrome called Marfan's. And in some cases, it's a terminal disease. But if you wouldn't say to the person, has it ever occurred to you that you might have Marfan's? I mean, you would see the diagnostic indicator, and you would tell the person. You know, physicians never ask us if we think we might have a pneumonia or tuberculosis. They know what to look for. You know, they diagnose disorders from the symptoms and offer the best treatment. Well, it's very difficult to deal with something if you don't know it's there. If I don't know I have, and it's very interesting, I'm sure all of you had this experience, where the thing that's like the person's most using my language, if a person's most dominant injunctive message, they may have no awareness of it until we tell them. And it's like because once you can name something, well, you can feel that it's there. But once you name something and recognize it and recognize its manifestation, you can start to do something about it. All right. So first, this I've already covered. The focus in Bob and Mary's work was between the self, myself, and the perceived giver of the injunctive message. So in their two-chair work, it would be the person using, and some parental figure, will always be the person, but some parental figure normally. And that would be the perceived giver injunction. And the issue was really getting straight with the giver that I'm not going to do that anymore. I mean, in retrospect, I watch my teachers help people oftentimes make a defiant decision, which was actually a big step up. If you've been mired in despair for a zillion years of your life, it was nice to have some sense of, it was very nice to have some sense of empowerment. I used to leave the Institute sort of full of defiant energy, which felt great, except I'd try to live from there. And that was kind of exhausting. All right. So this thesis is, as I've already said, it's a process of replacing. And that the I am never disappears and can reassert itself at opportune moments. You think you've solved that injunctive message? Then injunctive message will go, oh, okay, I'll wait for a while. In Alcoholics Anonymous, they have lots of great catchphrases. And one of them is, the alcohol is very patient. If you're an alcoholic, you're an alcoholic. And not your fault. And it's, you haven't drunk for 25 years. That's great. Well, the alcohol is very patient. And if you have a bad enough day to say, you know what, I deserve a drink today, it's like, alcohol's like, welcome back. Well, it's a little bit like that at an opportune moment. And new belief is established by an empathic understanding of the power of the injunctive message and the things we've already talked about. But the focus is different. It's self with self. It's changing a long-held but false and compelling belief. I can recognize perhaps the givers of the injunctive message, but that's not really important. What's important is I'm walking around believing something, spending my life revolving around something that's a false belief. And that's inside, whoever did it, quote unquote, did it to me 50 years ago. Well, it's inside of me now. So, the good news is that I can change how I think about things. I can change how I feel about things. And I like this concept, and I'd like you to think about it. I refer to injunctive messages as a worthy opponent, where you have a respect for it. It never totally goes away. Over time, it has less of a grip on our lives as we have more and more ways to cope with it. And we spend far less time under its sway, that is, on the left-hand side of the charts. But the left-hand side of the charts never goes away. The issue is when we get grabbed by the left-hand side of the chart, how long do I stay there? And do I have a way out? And can I go, oh, I don't have to be there. I don't have to be here. I got an awful letter one day. Yeah, well, it's just bombshells. I called a friend of mine who knew the situation around the letter. And I got a hold of him. He was a very busy guy, but he picked up the phone and I said, you won't believe this. And I said, I'm sitting. I said, I'm so enraged. I said, I'm beaten on my desk. And he said, without any rancor or judgment, he said, John, you don't have to be angry. He wasn't saying you have no reason to be angry. He was saying, you don't have to do this. You don't have to go to this place of beating on your, Basically, he was also basically saying, this is really a non-issue in the scope of your life. And don't you know, he was right. And pretty quickly, I stopped. I was angry, been insulted, but I stopped being enraged. Okay? He didn't say, it's grow up, or it's so wrong, or he just said, you don't have to do this. You don't have to launch yourself back over to the left-hand side of the charts. I was talking to one of my colleagues one time, learning this type A stuff I've done for 30 years. I was chatting with her before a group. She was about to run, and I was expressing my frustration about something I no longer remember. And my friend said, she was listening to me, and she looked at me, she said, you know, I think you're forgetting you have a type B place inside of you, type B as opposed to type A. You have a type B place inside of you that you can deal with this. And I went, oh, you're right. You're right, I did. So, but it's a worthy opponent. And when it grabs us and pulls us back in, rather than beating ourselves up, oh, I'm such a loser, I'm such an idiot, I said I'd never do that again. It's like you take an imaginary cap, and you look at that injunctive message and you tip your hat and you say, you know what? You are a worthy opponent. I really respect you. And then put your hat back on and you just keep on going. And you don't beat yourself up. So I'm going to go through and we'll get started with this. And then we'll take a break before I get done going through all this. But I'm going to go through the 5 categories of injunctive messages. You know, you've seen the first page. I don't know if you have a chance to look, but there are 10 pages here altogether. There's 5 categories. So there are 2 pages for each category of injunctive messages. And so I'm going to go through. There's not time to go through each of the injunctive messages. Thank goodness, you'd fall off your chairs. I'm going to go through each of the 5 categories and talk about them in a global way rather than specific injunctive message way. That is, globally, what are the difficulties created by each? What is the overall accepted falsehood? And what is the global ancient feeling? If you took all 5, what is the summation of the ancient feeling created? And then I'm going to talk about the healing and the new truth and the new voice, process of the healing. All right. And so the injunctive messages that impact survival, and I'm not going, they're right there. That's what's on your first page. Okay, those are the 5. And again, you know, only the don't exist says don't be here. These are listed here because they create such intense coping behaviors that over time, they are destructive to health, to personality. Oh, you know, you might live to be 90 years old, but you may be 90 years old and your personality is gone because it didn't survive. So there are more things to survive than just physical survival. You know? And so that's because of the intensity of the, and because of the darkness of these injunctive messages. That's why they're in this category, not because each one can be related to specific lethal behavior toward oneself. So, here again, globally, the difficulties created by these messages, self-destructive patterns that create an angry, and this is really the character, I'll show you, okay? Attitude that creates a drive, and it's to gain recognition, approval, or envy. There's a big drive when you have these injunctive messages to look like you have the best life there is. And these 3 things are in place of affection. Remember that if you have these injunctive messages, particularly that don't exist, it doesn't occur to you that warmth and affection, unconditional love is available in the world if you know the people, know how to recognize the people who have it so they can give it to you. Okay? And there's a genuine disregard for one's well-being, and it's unquestioned. Who cares? It sometimes results in suicidal thinking, but always in behaviors that are destructive over time to body and soul. Okay? Lots of people, like I said, live to be 90 years old, but by the time they get there, there's not much left. There's not much left in terms of their personality or ability to enjoy, or of course their ability to impart affection to other people because they haven't taken it in. There are efforts to become impervious to pain through a misguided definition of being strong. It's what I call trying to achieve the Superman state or Superwoman state, where nothing hurts me. And globally, the accepted falsehood is I don't matter. Okay? And the ancient feeling, global summation, no one cares what happens to me. Okay? Now, the healing. And because, and I like healing because it has an ing. It's a process of healing. All right? And right at the top of this, learning that unconditional love exists. It is possible to feel trusting enough to be vulnerable, to allow affection. See, the don't trust is in this bunch. It is possible to let that in. To be vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable to let someone else give you love. You don't have to be vulnerable to be voted, top salesperson of the year and get an ovation in an auditorium. But you let somebody really care for you and show you how much they care for you and love you. You gotta be vulnerable. Recognition and approval are good. They're good. I like them. But they are not affection. There's a disconnect. It's kind of like money. If I get enough money, I'll be happy. Disregarding, of course, all the millions, all the miserable people have tons of money. It's the same thing. If I get enough affection, if I get enough approval and recognition, that'll take the place of affection. It's like, boom. The search is for emotional warmth as opposed to finding reasons to be angry. When people have the injunctive, boy, you'll find a lot of anger, because anger is one of the useful coping behaviors. Now, forgiveness, which is very key to this, doesn't erase memory, but allows the past to be in the past. A lot of people, we do a lot of teaching about the nature of forgiveness. People think, I'm never going to forgive them. That wasn't okay what they did. It doesn't have to do with saying it was okay. It was being able to say, I can let go of it. So I can live my life now. I can live my life in the future. I'm not hung up in the past. So the new truth, global summation. I'm precious. I'm precious. And the new voice, it says, you're irreplaceable. So do yourself no harm. Do not harm yourself. And that word irreplaceable is very important. A lot of people try to become so important in some institution or job setting or that they're going to be irreplaceable. But my father walked home one day, died, and the Department of Government that he ran opened the next Monday. He died on a Saturday, it opened on Monday. One woman said to her husband, someday you're going to drop dead and that school, that elementary school is going to reopen. And she said, he did, and it did. So one of my colleagues likes to ask the question, or like to, she's gone now. But she would ask the question. You can, or she should make the statement with the question. You can be important in many places. But where is it? You are irreplaceable. If you know how to answer that question, you're well on your way to resolving these injunctions. Let's see. Bree, we take our break at 5 of or right on the hour? 5 of or on the hour?
Right on the hour.
Okay, thank you. I'll do
No
I'll do attachment, and then
Sure.
we'll take a break. and I hope this is all going down well. So these are the injunctive messages that impact attachment. And here again, there are the messages. So what are the difficulties, here again, globally, that these 5 injunctive messages create? Well, since the modeling for the emotional world, that is, you talk about attachment, injunctive messages, you were talking about the relationships you don't have with the world in general. You might be, there's there are loads of very lonely people. I know you know what I'm talking about, who are extremely popular. But that's not inside the emotional world. You can be talented enough to get 10,000 people to give you a standing ovation, but that's not affection, and that's not inside the emotional world. So since the modeling, if you have these injunctive messages, then somehow you're modeling for the emotional war. That's interesting. The emotional war, the emotional world was poor or lacking. Well, then it's easy to create fantasies of relationships that are narcissistic and perfectionistic. In the adult children community, as you know, there's tons of humor about this. The adult children of alcoholics or adult children of addicts, because they have all these, actually, I mean, they're not funny really, but they're hilarious stories about their misconception about relationships and meeting the perfect person. And in that world, there's a rule, which is if you meet someone that makes all the bells and whistles go off and makes you feel like you've just met the person that's going to make you happy, run. Why run? Well, because that's your fantasy relationship. It doesn't have anything to do with actually knowing how to be in the emotional world with somebody. And this creates a win-lose view where conflict inspires either abandonment or dominance. Think of doing couples therapy. And so much of it is, win-lose, and we've come here to tell, you're the judge and tell us which one is right. Or, and right in front of us, people either abandon each other by closing up, or they become attacking and dominant and win the conversation. The desperate desire to attain love blinds the person, and this is very important. Desperate desire to attain love blinds the person to the need to be a giver of love and affirmation. Now, one of the things that was really enjoyable about this work, it was how often we came up with something that was not intuitive. Okay? We used Heraclitus as our model. Heraclitus said, if you seek the truth, prepare to be surprised. All right? Well, we were surprised. For instance, with the survival injunctive messages, resolving those messages comes from accepting love from outside yourself. Seeing that the love is there and then learning how to accept it. Think about how many people you've worked with or known. They're just looking for the magic person. They're looking for the wonderful person who's going to make them happy. Well, that person is going to be full of love and all this stuff. Paradoxically, to resolve the attachment injunctive messages, and I'll talk about this on the next page, it's become a giver of the love and affirmation that you've longed for. So the accepted falsehood is, if you've got this falsehood, it's I am unlovable. Well, if I believe I am unlovable, nobody in this world, I can marry the prince or the princess of all good things, and that person won't be able to, quote unquote, cure me of feeling I'm unlovable. And the ancient feeling, of course, is no one loves me, right? So what is the healing for this? Again, ing, whoops, sorry. Uh-oh, how do I go back? There we go. So the healing, so it is not intuitive, but one must learn to give the love to others that has always been craved. I got a very nice letter from an old friend who'd actually just, again, a different world, but had just read a book I've written on type A behavior. And in there, it talks about the need to be expressive of love. And it's a very sweet and profound letter from my friend. And talk about his journey of being able to say the words, I love you. He's a very good psychotherapist, all these things. Great person. But He started out saying it to his dog. Right? But think about it, but when you say words of love, then your world starts to be full of love. If I say 2 or 3 times a day to different people, I love you, suddenly the world is full of love, not because it's finally giving me what I've met the magic person, but because my brain listens. It listens to what I say. Okay. So look for people for whom you feel warmth, a chemical affinity, in Emerson's words. Emerson used that phrase, chemical affinity. People with whom we feel this affinity, we feel this natural connectedness. Learn how, and here, this is the don't feel attached. Injunctive message, not one of the original messages from Bob and Mary. But it has to do with really feeling no sense of attachment in the world at all, feeling no love. And people who have that, they to protect themselves, they become very manipulative in relationships. And the issue for them is not like, we'll finally find a nice enough person, so they'll convince you to be nice. That's not the issue. It's learn how important it is to protect those you love from yourself. That was just the 7 quote unquote rules I have for marriage. And I forget, I think it's rule number 6. It's come to know yourself well enough so you can protect your loved ones from yourself. Okay? And then ask for the love you need without manipulation, because there is, yeah, you need to have that love, but to ask for it without manipulation. And the new truth here again, it's like, I'm actually capable of love. So many people think, oh, if I just find the right person, of course, I'm capable of love, so it'd be no problem. I've just been unlucky. I just need to find the right person. So and then it'll be all fine, as opposed to, no, it's like, no, I'm actually capable of it. I'm actually capable of protecting other people from myself. I can handle the discomfort of love, if you will. I can handle feeling uncomfortable in the emotional world because it's the number 1 skill there. To be comfortable with being uncomfortable as we work through things. And then we get to the really good stuff, which is also a little bit uncomfortable. When you have very intense moments with people, it's a little uncomfortable, but it's a kind of discomfort we want. So the new truth, I'm capable of love. And the new voice just says, be very loving. It doesn't say love and love. It says, be very loving, both yourself and others. And so we will now take a 10-minute break. And I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. All right. Bree, your turn.
Thanks, John. We're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. So we'll return at 10 after the hour. I'll put a timer up on my webcam here.
Okay.
If you have any questions for John, go ahead and direct message them to me in the chat. We'll also be sharing the presentation file at the end of his presentation, so you can watch for that as well. We'll see you guys back here shortly.
Great.
Hi, Miriam.
Who just said hi? Was that you, Brenda?
Phyllis, Phyllis.
Phyllis, I can't
Hi,
see.
Felipe.
Oh my God, is that
Hi,
Phyllis?
Hi, Diane.
Felipe, wow. Trying to get on gallery here. Ugh,
Lucy, where are you? I just saw you. Lucy Friedman. Lorna Johnson, hi.
Oh, there you are, Phyllis. Hi.
There's Van. Hi, Van.
There's Richard too. Hey, Richard.
This is cool. Some of you I should know, but I don't. Hi, Richard. It doesn't. Bobby, there's Bobby. Eat your cereal. Rita Muller.
I'm here.
Hi, Felipe. He's so like,
Huh. Oh, my goodness.
Hey everyone, this is Bree, your virtual producer. Just a heads up, I know a lot of you have been asking for the handout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it to the chat again. You should be able to download it. Just click on that file in the chat. But I'm also going to add the link to the materials, to the handout, just in case that doesn't download properly. If both of those options don't work, please direct message me your email and I will send it to you as soon as I can.
okay, hold on a minute, because I don't see what you're talking about.
Okay, so if you can open, do you have your chat panel open?
I have my chat channel. Oh, okay.
So-
It looks open. Yeah.
Okay, so I just added, if you look up a little bit, there's a John handout PDF that kind of comes in as a little bit of
Oh,
a,
I see it. Okay.
yep. And so if you click on that, it should download automatically. I've also added a link, which should be at the bottom of the chat right now. So once again, for anyone that's just coming in, if you click on your chat icon, that's found in your Zoom toolbar, the bottom of your screen. In the chat are these materials. And we'll also be sharing the presentation materials at the end. And I'll share them this way as well within the chat. And they'll also be sending them within an email, a follow-up email. Okay, that is the end of our break. So we'll go ahead and turn you back over to John.
Hi. And welcome back. I had a chance during the break to see lots of the different individuals who are in the workshop, and so I see a goodly number of people who were able to experience the magic of Bob and Mary. And matter of fact, I saw a number of faces who were among Bob and Mary's most cherished and beloved friends. Yes, Felipe, I'm talking about you, and that's Van. Also, I don't know, Ellen Bader, she's here, or if Carol's here. You not only got to see the magic, you also helped me with, you were observers for my dissertation weekend when I did my research on Bob and Mary's marathon, and Carol and Ellen are here. You were also at my wedding, and I don't know if anybody else in the crew was there. So, what I do. Okay, so it brings us to those injunctive messages that impact identity. And by the way, the first 5 injunctions that Bob and Mary ever identified and codified were don't exist, don't be you, don't make it, and one other. They were basically the flagship injunctions for 4 of the 5 categories. So And those were the first ones they solidified. So the injunctions that have to do with the impact on identity. And those are the ones, of course, who basically say, in some way or another, don't be you. And so the difficulties that are created, again, globally by this group of injunctive messages, basically unaccepting of one's own immutable personality. It is often not known or celebrated. There is oftentimes a desire to be someone else or to have the gifts of other people. And it's easy to be overcome with shame and to present a false front to the world. Strengths are used to establish feelings of superiority, and perceived weaknesses are despised. There is no concept of acceptance of one's natural self. There's always this sort of like trying to become someone else. My favorite quote from Emerson, it's just a very short sentence. And he says, envy is ignorance and imitation is suicide. And I love that quote because it has to do with the futility of trying to be anyone other than we are. And the accepted falsehood, is something's wrong with me, or I am a flawed person. And the ancient feeling is no one cherishes me for me being me. All right? So the healing is to replace the drive to be someone else with a sincere curiosity about one's real self. And of course, the only way we learn about ourselves is by looking in the mirrors of other people. It's very difficult to know who we are if we don't have intimate relationships. And for some people, not all certainly, but for a lot of people, that's the first time they've really had feedback about themselves where they could really learn about themselves is in contact with us. And because finding out about them, they're so terrified they're going to find out they're an awful person, that they're often relieved to find out, well, they have flaws, but there also is there's something about us that is admirable. In other words, when they're looking through our lens at them. Through curiosity, identify and love. Now here's the issue, to love both strengths and weaknesses. Because in the don't be you world, it's like I want to become nothing but my strengths and I want to eliminate my weaknesses. I feel very personal about this because I spent a large part of my life when I was a young person trying to get rid of my sensitiveness. Well, guess what? But I saw it as a huge weakness. Here's an old name. For any of you who remember who David Steer was, the first piece of Gestalt work I ever did with David, he had me take my strong side and my weak side and have a conversation between the two. And my strong side kept saying to my weak side, get out of here, get out of here, get out of here, leave me, leave me. And David was sitting watching this. And finally, then I got stuck. Of course, because there's no way my left arm was going to leave my body. And I did something that's very key. It's very, very diagnostic. I remember doing it. As I looked at him, as I presented him in this impossible situation, and then I smiled just a little bit, but I looked at him like, see, no one can solve this. Okay, it's diagnostic. So David said, well, there is another option, you know. And I said, what? There's no other option. And very slowly and very warmly and calmly, David took both his hands and he went like that. He said, maybe you could put them together. And I was like, well, in the next 5 or 10 years, I did. But it was like, that had never occurred to me. My weakness was something to get rid of. So often what was seen as a weakness is now seen as a unique gift. Duh. My multifaceted self is far more interesting than any false front. Committed relationships are the key to knowing myself. Okay? We cannot know ourselves outside of people who are willing to tell us about ourselves. But both are good and are bad. And I didn't know I talked too loud till I got married. And about a year into our marriage, and my wife said, you know, the rest of the people in the restaurant aren't interested in what we're talking about. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you kind of shout. I do not. Well, guess what? But I actually didn't know that. I didn't know that. It wasn't like I'm shouting in this restaurant. It's like, I didn't know. And obviously other people knew, but they weren't going to go near that. But she could tell me. So the new truth, I cherish my unique life. And the new voice says, you are one of a kind with your own beauty. Yeah, okay. So these injunctive messages that impact our sense of competence. Here again, the don't make it was one of the original four, well, one of the four of the five that Bob and Mary came up with. All right. The problems, difficulties created by the competence injunctive messages. Nothing I do is ever good enough for very long. The habit of over-expectation spoils the feelings of success and achievement that are necessary for self-esteem. Success and achievement are necessary for self-esteem, but if my expectations are greater than my achievements, my self-esteem is not in any way helped. Measurement and competition are only measures of success, leading to an easily aroused sense of competition. You know, the quintessential type A man won't let his 5-year-old child win a dominoes. You know, he can't handle it. He's got to win every competition. Even if measurably successful in the practical world, still haunted by fears of failure and thoughts of not being good enough. And the accepted falsehood is, and you can look at captains of industry, you know, I'm a failure. My good friend, Meyer Friedman, the guy who coined type A behavior, he interviewed more than 20 Nobel laureates. He was that kind of guy. He would call people up and say, can I interview you? And they'd say, sure. He interviewed 4 or 5 former presidents. He said, of those 20-some Nobel laureates in science, he said, all but one of them was a miserable human being. Now, he wasn't being negative about them. He said, no, they were miserable. And he asked one of them, he said, you've won the greatest award there is in science. To some degree, your life, your name will be immortal. Why has that not helped your self-esteem? Why do you have such low self-esteem? And he said, because what I did for the Nobel Prize was in the past. Okay? And the ancient feeling is no one believes in me. And by the way, getting a Nobel Prize will not quote unquote, solve that. The healing. Expectations are tamed to fit our natural abilities. Admiration of other models of success replaces an automatic and voluntary sense of competition. Feeling successful is associated with the direction and passions of my life. And when we get to the second page shortly, I'm going to say more about the direction of our lives. Wisdom and satisfaction become major quests. Confidence in learning comes from setbacks, replaces an aversion to assertive action. That is, where our confidence comes from is that we always get up after we have a setback, as opposed the setback means, oh, I'm never going to make it. Nope, that's not where confidence comes from. Do you know what an expert in any area is? An expert in any area is someone who has no more mistakes to make in that area. They made all the mistakes and learned from it, and they become an expert. The new truth is my life is admirable, or the direction of my life is admirable. Very important concept. The new voice, and it says your pursuits, not data, make you admirable. Okay. And now we come to the last of the categories, which are called the security category. This is like having a sense of security as we go about life, right? And what are the ingredients? What takes away from a sense of security, no matter what our financial or our social status might be, and what actually gives us a sense of security? Because, as Helen Keller said, absolute security does not exist in nature. And she also went on to say, which I thought was interesting for her, she said, life is either a daring adventure or it's nothing, right? So the difficulty is created. It creates a life focused on becoming bulletproof as a model for feeling secure, rich enough, proud enough, high enough, good enough, whatever. Feelings are disregarded or severely maligned as signs of weakness and unwanted vulnerability. There's a drive toward an imaginary future that creates a sense of time urgency. If I'm miserable today, but I'm headed someplace that's going to be great, well, I'm kind of in a hurry for you to hurry up in front of me and get through the grocery checkout line so I can get to that future. There is a drive toward happiness, enjoyment, and relaxation are goals of this future state, but not experienced in the present moment. A lack of feeling alive in the present moment hampers the creation of rewarding or reassuring memories. As one friend of mine said, it is very difficult to become full eating tomorrow's soup. And the accepted falsehood is I'm hollow and insecure. And the ancient feeling is no one invests in me. Whoops. Sorry. So the healing. Happiness and a habit of gratitude are necessary for health. As one colleague of mine said, no gratefulness, no happiness. Doesn't matter what you got. Doesn't matter how famous you are. No gratefulness, no happiness. The idea of absolute security is a fiction. Self-confidence derives from the memory of overcoming, very much like in the others, overcoming past challenges. Suffering and melancholy are parts of life and are not signs of failure. Feeling emotions while feeling confident to handle them enriches life rather than feeling frightening. I continue that the number one skill in the emotional world is to feel comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. Because nobody dies there. The discomfort doesn't mean anything terrible has happened. It just means that it's what you need to get where you want to go. And I tell people, it's a kind of discomfort that you want. The new truth, I feel prepared for life. Not that I've got life under control, or have, they'll say, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And the new voice, you get to enjoy and feel confident in your life. You get to enjoy your life, and you get to feel confident. Not that everything is now guaranteed, but I'm confident that when the bumps occur, I have shock absorbers, all right? So the power of naming, and that has to do with being able to tell people there's specific, really powerful injunctive messages so that they know how to respect and deal with this worthwhile component. And it's our goal to inform them, invite them, and then invite them from the left-hand side of the charts to the right, from bitter to healing. Now we get to the second pages, all right? You got, for each injunctive message, or each group, you got 2 pages. Whew. I don't know, I think the girl's got a little OCD. What do you think? Anyway, it's this came from the concept, the idea. Look, if an injunctive message, which is a believable falsehood, which is negative, is active, which is stirring around in your life, it's going to create a kind of bitterness about yourself, about other people, about life. It's going to create a bitter response. And this sheet was really designed, and this concept was designed so people could take a look and maybe do some self-diagnosing of their injunctive messages. And you see the way that this sheet is laid out. You got on the left, you have the bitter response, thinking that reflects the influence of the injunctive message. And what that don't exist is like the bitter response is I'm a mistake, and my life has no meaning. Now you see, and here's where, and so the idea is you can actually mark where you are on here. You can, it's what I call a set point. Here again, my beloved teachers thought you could jump. You could kind of like jump from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. But remember, they were about something very noble. They were really looking for a solution to a long-term problem, as opposed to that we can move. And here, healing becomes described as moving across the spectrum, as opposed to, I'm there, I'm on the right-hand side. It's like, because once we're moving in the direction of healing, There's stats on as soon as you stop smoking, the benefits within the first 20 minutes, the first 10 days, the first 2 years. Once you stop smoking and move toward, well, your lungs don't repair, overnight, but you started moving that direction immediately. And the same thing here. It's being able to be moving. So the movement is from the bitter. In the middle is the redecision, the unexpected truth, unconditional love and affirmation to exist. And over on the right-hand side, you have the healing response. You go from a bitter response. As you resolve these injunctive messages, your quote unquote natural responses will be healing. Okay? You won't have to, you work at it at first, but it's an overriding feeling, a sense of, my life is precious. So I use this with people. And by the way, there is no when you're using these charts, you can give them to people, you cannot give them to people. It's not like you're going to start at the left and work your way through them on the first page. It's just however they benefit or don't benefit. And also the red, the black, and on the last page, the green ink. That's there for the number of people have translated these charts into different languages. And the red and the different colors are just to let people know that that's the new material. So they didn't have to, for their ease. You don't have to keep the colors to give these to people. If you can't, go ahead. So we change through being helped to move our set points on the spectrum from bitter towards healing. And it's been very nice because I've handed these charts to people I've seen for years, before this was ever created. And it's very nice for them. They mark where they started out and they mark where they are today. And it's like, oh, I really have changed. This has not been a static process. Okay. From bitter to healing, the importance of direction. Change comes from moving on the spectrum. Though dramatic at moments, when it comes time to do a dramatic moment with somebody, well, I have to tell you, I truly learned from the masters of how to do a powerful, impactful moment. And out here again, I saw Richard there a moment ago, Van. All of us came out of this where we know how to do that at a particular moment. It's a wonderful thing to have. At moment, it is always gradual. And at a certain point, the person says, look how far I've come. Oops, sorry. So this is some repeat here. The most important thing to understand about injunctive messages is they are totally untrue. There is no truth. The idea one should not exist, be close, have your own identity, feel competent or confidence about life. There is power. Since there's power in being able to name something, it is helpful for an individual to name the injunctive messages that afflict them. And it is a message, not an empirical truth. Naming a mission, a person can begin to rebut it. The only real powers they have is if they are believed and not identified. And you do know. That's an old, but actually you do know. People feel very deep feelings of shame about the kind of bitter beliefs that come out of injunctive messages. Because it really is summarized, and there's something wrong with me. And they're afraid it's going to be confirmed by somebody, so that they don't tell. And in not telling, they don't get to identify. So here's a little bit about discernment and the despairing decision. When I'm helping someone uncover the source of pain, and by the way, despairing decisions are exceedingly painful. Okay. And so in dealing with, when we're uncovering the despairing decision, I am very empathic, even if the person is not. These decisions are made under duress and are believed, and I am very empathic. And people say, well, you don't have to feel sorry for me. I said, I'm not feeling sorry for you. It sounds so painful that your father hated you. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Because for a lot of people, we're the first contact they actually have with empathy. And of course, the only way we get empathy for ourselves is by being able to take in empathy from other people. Then when dealing with the defiant decision, when I'm revealing this to the patient, I show great admiration for their courage and for their ingenuity. You know, the defiant decision very possibly saved their life, you know, and was of enormous help to them. And so it's like, wow, you were so brave, you were so smart. Now, the coping behavior, this is very interesting. I always use smoking as the ultimate coping behavior, as a really great example of coping behaviors, okay? Because the coping behavior brings almost immediate relief, right? Somebody's stuck in traffic, they're frustrated, and they start honking the horn. Well, they're still stuck. But somehow the person honking the horn feels more empowered. It brings relief to the feeling of helplessness. Well, I smoked when I was a young man. Smoking is incredibly comforting. And you get very hooked, literally, to your coping behaviors. So there's a lot of belief put into the coping behavior. Here again, smoke. What are the characteristics? Well, immediate relief, irritating the people around them. Coping behaviors are irritating the people around them, okay? And over time, I mean, what happens to you if you smoke long enough and enough? Well, you experience severe health problems, okay? Well, if you practice deep bitterness every time you get held up in traffic, guess what that does to your personality over time? And there's also, of course, great research that shows that also can end up with physical maladies like coronary heart disease. So the beginning of a long conversation, the person believes the coping behavior is the best way to be successful and survive. Think the concept of deprogramming. So I'm just sort of a constant source of confrontation when I'm dealing with that. And it's not unlike helping somebody stop smoking, but it's like giving up the habit of being impatient, giving up the habit of being really critical of other people or critical of myself. I mean, all these things. We get pushback. I mean, people cling to their coping behaviors because this really helped me, and this is a pattern that's worked for me. And I'll say things like, "Well, how's your marriage working? How's your relationship with your kids working?" "Well, not so good." Yeah, no kidding. So I'm very consistent, I know you are, in helping people understand, one, the destructive nature of what it is they've glommed onto, and two, of course, is that there's a better way. I mean, psychotherapy, it's like being in intimate relationships. It's an invitational process. You can't say to somebody, "You're going to be intimate with me. You're going to really be close to me." You can't do that. You can feel for that person. You can invite them into the same feeling. Well, in the same way, we're over on the right-hand side of these charts. Hopefully most of our lives, of this in our lives. And it's like, look, I'm inviting over to something better. And it looks like a deep canyon. That impasse is very, very hard to imagine that you can get over it. And so it's an invitational process. Bob and Mary, we're very explicit about getting contracts with people. I've changed my concept of contract. I also I get a very clear contract. But the clear contract that I work with to get with people is not like we're going to deal with a specific thing, because people come with specific phobias or whatever. The contract is, are you willing to be in psychotherapy with me? That is, are you willing for me to speak to you in a way that I wouldn't speak to you if we were sitting across from each other in a bar having a friendly conversation? That is, can I be a talking mirror? Can I tell you what I see? again, I have a long history with type A behavior. And in my first meeting with another beloved friend, Myra Friedman, in the interview, he said, would you like to know the type A behavior you've showed in the interview? And I blushed and said, I was trying not to show any. And he said, well, would you like to know? And I think I remember going, yes. Well, he rattled off about 10 behaviors. Now, I was kind of a made guy. I was, traveling around the world teaching therapists. But I got to tell you what that old man told me in those 10 minutes or 5 about those 10 behaviors. Everyone he said, every one of them, I went, oh, I did do that. Oh, I did do that. Oh, I did. And I had no control over those behaviors until someone held them up to me and showed me that I was doing them in the same way we show people their blind side. Most of the coping behaviors operate on the blind side. The despairing decision, if you listen closely, you will hear the actual words or version of them from the patient. Often the wording is hidden in a laugh or a chuckle or said in a dismissive way. That child will be the death of me, ha ha. When confronted with the seriousness of what was just said, the person will often say, oh, I didn't mean it literally, I was just being humorous. But the key to hearing the despairing decisions is to listen literally to the exact words, not the affect. I often say to someone, I am not going to laugh at the idea of somebody being the death of you. And we're getting close to when I'm going to take pictures. Take pictures. We're getting close to when I'm going to take questions. On the first day of training with my beloved teachers, we were sitting in a group on the floor. Somebody was playing a tape. Bob was he was listening to tape and giving supervision. And the person said something who was presenting. I don't remember. And it was very funny. And all of us, I think that's all, being 4 of us sitting in that little circle, we all started to laugh hilariously, uproariously. And Bob Goulding's voice came booming out over top of us because he could boom. And he yelled, I'm not going to laugh at that. And I have to say, I'm a quick study. I got it immediately. We were laughing at something where he basically said, that's going to kill me. And Bob said in his booming voice, I am not going to laugh at the idea of you being dead. So, and that was my first day. So I'm going to leave these things because they're on the slides. These slides will come to you and they will be self-instructive. Your teacher today, there is me, John McNeel. There's my website. There's my email underneath of it. So you remember when I started the presentation, I showed that wonderful picture of my beloved friends with tears in Bob's eyes and a warm smile on Mary's face. And what were they looking at? Well, they were looking at that right there. And for you old hands who are watching that, of course, you recognize Ed Frost, standing in the background, Presbyterian minister, also an associate member of the faculty. And actually, it's very instructive because Ed sort of standing there because my wife and I kind of married ourselves, and he kind of looked on as we did it. But a wonderful guy. But that's us, and that's almost 48 years ago. So 48 years this summer. So that's what they were looking at. I meant to put in a picture right here of the last time I was up at the Institute, no longer, of course, the Institute, and to Bob's, there's a marker on his ashes. Actually, Bob's ashes are, you can see a big tree in the background there. His ashes are buried at the bottom of that tree, and with just a very simple marker, Robert L. Goulding, MD, with his dates. And so if you wish, you can go to my website and go to, if you want to, it's and you go to Redecision section. And there you will find 7 of 9 chapters that I've written so far, telling my story of the training with my beloved teachers. I got to tell you, it was a trip. And here again, Van and all the rest of you out there who are old heads, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And the last 2 chapters will be coming. And the title of those 7 chapters are Bob and Mary. They've got an Australian tilt to them because Tony White from Australia asked me to write those. So I include a lot of contacts with people from Australia. And until we meet again, I'm actually holding my book. I like to tell people I have 2 TAs in my life. And one of them is transactional analysis and the other is type A behavior. So that's a book that I've just written and self-published called Aspiring to Kindness, Transforming Male Type A Behavior. It's a pretty good read if you have an interest in kindness. So I'm going to let, I think, yeah, that's all.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, good, Wayne. Time for you to take over.
Yes, and well, actually, don't go away because
I'm not, did I go away? I didn't mean to go away.
no, you didn't. But I just wanted to be sure you were going to stick around because we have some questions
I
that
know.
we're going to ask you. So here's the first one. Allison Freeman said, it seems like the injunctive messages are from both the positive and negative aspects of the critical parent ego state. Could you comment on that, John?
Well, I think it was only coming from not just the critical parent, but also that part of the critical parent that has a destructive impact. Because of course you have to have a good critical parent to be able to correct people and things like that. It's that, of course, you can get into critical parent where there's a kind of brutality. And so I don't think of it coming from the good part of the critical parent. I think of it as coming from the part of the person who was harmed. I really think of the injunctive messages as coming from the child ego state of the parent. And that was how Bob and Mary would portray it in a diagram. That the injunctive messages came from the child ego state. They would also show that what they call the counter injunction coming from the parent to the parent. That is, it was the parent's best intention. In other words, the parent may say, with their encounter, they say, well, we want you to be successful. We want you to be happy. We want you to have close relationships. Not understanding that there was a counter message or a different, more powerful message coming from their own child ego state, which is, well, don't do those things. You know, don't surpass me. Don't be better than me. All these things that parents are not aware of. I mean, there are just very few parents in this world who want to do harm to their children. I mean, some may because they're crazy, but most parents really want to do, but we pass on. It was recognized, thousands of years ago in the Old Testament and in the Hebrew Bible. The sins of the father are passed to the child. Those are the sins, are the injunctive messages. These things perpetuate a bitter view of life.
Thanks, John. Let's move on to the next question. It's very targeted and specific. Can OCD be cured with redecisions?
No. I mean, OCD is in the process of letting go of OCD. So I've done an awful lot of work with OCD and anxiety as it's affected my own life. And in the process of learning over a number of years, learning the skills to really be able to manage anxiety. Here again, you don't get rid of anxiety if you're super sensitive like I am, and it's probably most of you are because you're psychotherapists. And guess what kind of people become psychotherapists? Well, hard asses don't. And in learning the skills to be able to manage anxiety, well, you learn many of the skills for how to manage injunctive messages. I mean, if you will, being a sensitive, it's genetic. It's genetic. If you want to talk about there being injunctive messages that go with being genetic. I mean, if you're born a certain way, you have to learn how to cope with that. You have to learn the skills. And the same thing with OCD. I mean, my friend who taught me, he really made very little distinction between OCD and anxiety. He talked about phobics and OCDs, and then to put them together into one word, phobox. Because if you have high anxiety, you're going to have phobias, and if you have phobias, you're going to have OCD, and OCD, you're going to have phobias. So it's made them one word, and it's a process of learning these skills, how to handle life, so you can manage it in the same way, as opposed to like, I've eliminated that message from my life. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I see where that's coming from. Yeah, I don't have to listen to that anymore. I've learned how to manage that, you know?
Great, John. Yeah, I noticed that Richard is here and he has his hand raised. So Richard, is he on board?
Of course he does. It's Richard. Hi, Richard. Oh,
You go on.
Mike
and
is on.
ask- go ahead and ask.
John has a wonderful chapter that spells this out. So John, you didn't mention this great chapter you have called The Heart of Redecision Therapy, Resolving Injunctive Messages
thanks.
in the book Transactional Analysis in Contemporary Psychotherapy. So if any of you want to review an in-depth work of what John said today, I highly recommend this chapter.
Thank you, Richard. And by the way, of course,
Where did we get
that is a terrific book.
Where
It's
can
a-
we order that? Where can we get that book, please?
On Amazon,
Okay, thank you.
Transactional Analysis in Contemporary Psychotherapy.
Who's that edited by?
I put it together, but it's written by 15 different transactional analysts.
Oh, wow. Sounds
I
great.
gotta tell you, I am gobsmacked in admiration for the work that Richard Erskine put into that book. I mean, I know how much work he did just with me. I mean, my goodness. So, on behalf of all of us, Richard, thank you for that. That is a landmark book. And man, hours and hours of dedicated devotion, folks.
And I have another thank you for you for the recent article you had in the Transactional Analysis Journal about the cathexis issue. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And we'll move on to another question now. Asking for an example of two-chair work in Redecision.
Well, that's a very good and interesting question, because in the first 25 years of my working with people, I don't mean to dismiss it, but I was a two-chair monkey. I mean, it wasn't very, very long until I had a second chair in front of somebody, and I would have them talking to the chair. In workshops that I do now, people who know about two-chair work say, when are you going to do some two-chair work? I'm kind of like, well, when I'm doing those short intensive workshops, I'm usually doing, of course, with therapists. And I said, what I'm really doing is modeling for you how I do therapy over time with people, as opposed to trying to do something as dramatic as often two-chair work is. Now, having said that, again, if the moment calls from two-chair work, I know how to do it, but it's moved more to the periphery of my set of skills.
So can you give us a quick snapshot of what does it look like when you do a two-chair therapy?
Oh, okay, sure. I mean, in watching the masters, and here again, usually a group of 30, 35 therapists living for a month with Bob and Mary at their institute on the side of Mount Madonna. Every day, very, very intense. So we got to know each other very well. They were very good at building a very supportive community. And so when they worked with people, they like to work in a 20-minute increment. And they were very good. And of course, we all had wheels under us because we were all psychotherapists. So we could move pretty quickly. And they could move somebody from realizing they would take what it is they wanted to work on, and they would state their contract, but pretty quickly they would connect what was in their contract to an injunctive message. They would pretty quickly connect that injunctive message back to the parent or parental figure that had been most responsible for delivering it. Then they would invite the person, once again, we were all pretty fluid, we were pretty flexible. And they would invite the person to go back into that scene and relive it as if it's now. Sometimes they would include other people to actually role play people, but very often they would just invite the person to go back in time, be as they were when they were 5 years old, deciding I shouldn't be here. Then they would put the parent that message seemed to come from in the other chair. And they would have them begin a conversation back and forth, and they would have them switch places. So they would speak to the father, if it's that. Then they'd become the father and speak back to the child until they could really hear the injunctive message being given by that internalized father figure. And then we'd come back, and very often helping the person with words make a new decision, to stand up to that father figure, me, that other person. And it did in such a way that in the moment the person said, I have a right to be here, I have a right to be here, very often the whole room would erupt in applause. And very often the person would be weeping. And these were very powerful moments. And of course, here again, we were therapists. And very often we would carry those things with us, and they would make really long-term differences in our lives. The problem is it was not possible to create that with everyday folks who were maybe more sick, but that was what it looked like. And they were they were very good at getting everyone to laugh at what was really funny. It wouldn't take very long in a workshop before they'd found some kind of theme where people would start laughing about things. Always things that were really funny. I said to Bob one night, because I used to love to watch this whole group of people come in, and then very quickly they'd be laughing and crying together. And I said to Bob, I said, you get people to laugh at things that are really funny. I mean, the laughter, the humor always built people up. It never put someone down. And Bob said, I remember we were standing out on the portico when we had this conversation. He said, John, he said, I truly believe that when someone is laughing about something that is truly funny, at that moment, that person cannot be sick, at least in that moment. So his whole belief system was about creating an environment for redecision and change. And it was very powerful. And having a whole room full of what became your friends cheering for you and laughing with you and crying with you. And then later, and we all socialized, we had fun, and it was very powerful. And like I said, I wish every single one of you, I wish I could transport you back in time. I would love for you to experience what was there. It was something else. And it was all new. It was all new. It was all revolutionary. It was all fresh and energetic. And it was before Bob's alcoholism began to ruin things and other parts of it that were difficult. Okay? But the intention was to create something really good, something really powerful. And it took me a while to handle my feelings of disloyalty, to move beyond some of their precepts, but I've never moved beyond my love. And,
Well, we're grateful that you did. And that you, thank you so much for your time.
oh, thank you. Thank you. It's an incredible pleasure.
I know there are at least 20 questions that we have not had time to answer. So want to let everyone know that John and I will meet after this meeting, and I will present the rest of the questions to him. We will record that, and we will send that out as a supplementary video so that you have a chance to hear answers to all the questions that were submitted. Thanks, John. I'm going to turn it back down to Brenda. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Brenda?
Yay, John. Yay, John.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. Thanks so much.
Hi, John.
Hi.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you for
See you
being here.
soon.
Thank you for being here today.
John.
Thank you, John.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
It was a great
Bye-bye.
workshop. I want more.
Brenda, were you
Thanks,
giving
John.
some closing
Yes.
information?
Yes,
Dr. McNeel.
on behalf of our general coordinator of the USATAA Council, Bob Hempel, I think we had a slide, but I thank you, John, for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
And we thank all of you for attending the workshop today. And Bob encourages you to join USATA or renew your membership. And we, USATA, are an affiliate of ITAA. And we are going to have a general meeting on the 19th of March. And we encourage you to attend. We encourage you to attend our other workshops. The next one will be on May 7th with Ellen Bader, and that will be on managing the crisis of infidelity.
Don't miss
So-
that workshop.
Again, visit our website, and we have a lot of activities, and we're eager to have people join our various committees. And so let us know, email coordinator@usata.org. Thank you.
Thank you for joining, everyone. Have a great day. If you have any additional questions, you can type them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll close the room here in about 2 minutes.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
Great workshop.
Oh,
Thank you, John.
Too
You're welcome.
short. I thought it was 2 hours.
Well, it covered the space of 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Oh, it was wonderful. We want more.
Thank you very much. Much
Thanks,
enjoyed.
John.
Hey, man,
Thanks so much.
you're so welcome. You're so welcome. Thank you for being here.
It was great to be here with everyone. It was great to see everyone too.
Isn't that nice?
Hi, Felipe. Oh, yeah, it was
All
wonderful.
these wonderful faces,
I know. I love it.
all these good people.
Fabulous.
Thank you.